Oak Bay Gordon Head.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Pursuant to the agreement regarding my application under Standing Order 35, I rise to move the following motion. By leave, I move that this House do now adjourn to discuss a matter of urgent public importance, namely that in light of the recent IPCC special report on global warming and in light of the federal emergency debate on this subject which occurred yesterday, whether we as legislators are acting with sufficient urgency and demonstrating the appropriate leadership on preparing for and mitigating the escalating impacts of climate change on our province.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and members of the Legislative Assembly for allowing this emergency debate to take place. I note that my two colleagues in the BC Green Party and I will each have the floor for a few minutes, and we'll divvy up the topics that we'd like to cover here. I'll speak to my background in science. My colleague, the MLA for Saanich North and the Islands, will speak about responsibility, our responsibility, and my colleague, the MLA from Cowichan Valley, will focus on opportunity and, where possible, hope. This is the first week the Legislature has convened since the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change special report was released. 3 expert IPCC working groups issued a dire and urgent warning to governments around the world, including our own, arguing that we must immediately ramp up our efforts to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees or face serious and irreversible consequences. I know a little bit about the IPCC, having served as a lead author in that regard for the last 4 international assessments, and it was a proud moment for me to see a former postdoc and PhD student serving on the recent panel's committee report. Over the last 150 years, Earth has made a transition from the past, when climate affected the evolution of human societies, to the present, in which humans are affecting the evolution of climate and weather. Today, we are at a pivotal moment in human history. Our generation will be responsible for deciding what path the future climate will take. You and I, as elected officials, will either be complicit in allowing climate change to despoil our world, or we can lead the way and choose a new future. As a climate scientist, a lead author on 4 previous IPCC assessments, I know that it is my moral responsibility to speak about climate change as clearly and accurately as possible. I do not aim to alarm, but need to emphasize the severity of the threat that lies ahead, because it is so often underestimated. The current state of BC's climate and environment is not, and I quote, the new normal, as many have been saying. Normal implies a plateau and consistency. We are not facing a plateau. We are on the edge of a very steep downward trend, and I'm sad to say this is just the beginning. Over hundreds of millions of years, atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, together with global temperatures, dropped slowly as carbon was stored slowly in the sediments of the deep ocean, and the great gas, oil, and coal reserves of today were formed. Yet in the matter of just a few decades, the carbon drawn down over many tens of millions of years is being released back to the atmosphere. In a single generation, humans are taking atmospheric conditions back to that which existed during the age of the dinosaurs. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere now far exceeds the natural range over the last million years, and it's still rising quickly. Metaphorically, we're piling more blankets on an overheating planet. The hotter it gets, the more symptoms, if you will, humans will experience. If global emissions do not start to dramatically decline in the next few years, many millions of people, including British Columbians, will be at risk from heat waves, drought, floods, storms, and wildfires. Our coasts and cities will be threatened by rising sea level. Many ecosystems, plants, and animals will face widespread extinction, including most of the world's coral reef systems. This is not new information, Honourable Speaker. Scientists have been raising concerns about what their data has been showing for years, for decades, for more than a century. In fact, in 1938, Guy Callender made a presentation to the Royal Society of London that claimed, 1, humans had increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, 2, increased CO2 could cause an increase in global temperatures, and 3, global temperatures were rising. In the early 1800s, Jean-Baptiste Joseph Fourier was the very first to recognize that the atmosphere was essentially transparent to incoming radiation from the sun, but was very effective at blocking outgoing radiation to the solar system, thereby creating the greenhouse effect. In the mid-1800s, John Tyndall, a British scientist, was the first to be able to determine different greenhouse gases absorb preferentially different wavelengths of infrared radiation. In 1957, Roger Revelle and Hans Suess from the University of California warned that the oceans could not absorb the human emissions of carbon dioxide as fast as they were being produced. They stated in their seminal work, "Human beings are now carrying out a large-scale geophysical experiment of a kind that could not have happened in the past, nor be reproduced in the future. We are returning to the atmosphere and the oceans the concentrated organic carbon stored in the sedimentary rocks over hundreds of millions of years." And on it goes. In the 1980s, the National Academy of Science and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency said Academy of Sciences were deeply concerned about the magnitude of environmental changes and noted we may get in trouble in ways we have barely imagined. The Environmental Protection Agency in the US said this, "Agricultural conditions will be significantly altered, environmental and economic systems potentially disrupted, and political institutions stressed. Changes by the end of the 21st century could be catastrophic, taken in the context of today's world. A soberness and a sense of urgency underlie our response to a greenhouse warming." This is not new scientific information, as I've said. What is new, however, is how urgent and how dire the scientific warnings have become. And what's remarkable when you look at this issue compared to every other environmental issue out there, the people speaking loudest and strongest and most frequently are the scientists themselves out of concern for the direction we are taking our planet. In recent years, the consequences of rising carbon dioxide and temperatures have become painfully clear. We're on target to take ocean surface acidity into a realm for which we have no comparison in the history of Earth. Coral beds that have been around for millions of years are going extinct on a widespread basis. In Canada, overall precipitation will increase, but it'll come in fewer, more extreme events interspersed between longer periods of drought. There'll be an increased risk of flooding and wildfire, and we've seen that in British Columbia 2 years in a row. At the rate we're going, we're looking at between 20 and 50% of the world's species, almost certainly including the iconic Fraser River sockeye and Canada's polar bear, becoming committed to extinction this century. As temperatures warm, salmon will have increased mortality rates as they struggle through hot waters to their spawning grounds. In southern regions, streams will dry up. Think for a moment about a massive crop failures, economic collapse, and millions of climate refugees desperate for safer homes. Our growing consumption levels are unsustainable on an Earth with finite resources, and the limit is clearly in view. Think about whatever issue you care about most as an MLA in British Columbia: economic growth, affordability, healthcare, education, poverty, transportation, agriculture, reconciliation, childcare, housing, resource development, fisheries, forestry, safety, security, prosperity, family. Every single one will be undermined and endangered by unmitigated climate change. I know that this can sound scary and an overwhelming proposition. It's a normal human reaction to resist change and instead try to preserve the status quo. But the IPCC report, the one released this past weekend, tells us exactly where this leads. We need to start now to build a new way of life. It can be a shift that provides economic opportunities like this province has never seen. By tackling climate change seriously, with carefully designed policies, BC's economy can grow in new ways. We can prosper in a time of crisis, but it requires us to be honest with ourselves. In your work and mine, it is important we keep the spotlight on the stark and alarming reality of climate change and not get lost in the everyday bustle or the fog of November's rain. The time for yes, but arguments, yes, but other people emit more, or yes, but other industries are worse, or yes, but BC is small and this is a global problem, has passed. We now need yes and arguments. Yes, other people emit more. Yes, other industries will always be worse. And yes, BC is a small compared to the world. And yet, we will do our part. As much as we may wish we don't have jurisdiction over the world, but we have influence in BC where we live, and that is what is important. This is an all-of-government issue, so it needs to be an all-government solution. Every ministry, every MLA, every riding, every sector, we need everyone to look at the area they have influence on and think about how they can make positive change in the context of a warming world. As the IPCC special report makes painfully clear, we only have a few short years left to steer away from catastrophic climate change. Choosing to take action is a luxury set to expire. Soon we will be forced. We must not squander this opportunity. Thank you again to everyone in this chamber for allowing this emergency debate to take place.